I saw my stepson cleaning his instrument in the bathtub. I therefore assisted. A tale of infidelity through the opening of the door. I watched Logan at the wash basin, his back to me, shirtless, shoulders hunched over, hands moving purposefully, maybe focused on something, but I couldn't make out what it was. I cleaned it and held it, sometimes because I had to, but in those moments I wanted to control it, to move up and down. I didn't know what I was thinking. For us, your support is crucial. 90% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet, so we truly need your support to continue producing engaging material. To ensure you never miss an update, click the subscribe button and enable notifications. Let me continue the story now and pay great attention, 'cause there will be a really surprising turn of events. When I walked into the bathroom and suddenly saw my stepson, I took a choice that turned the moment into one of the most thrilling moments of my life. On a typical Tuesday, the event got underway. This was often the case on the evenings when my stepson Logan arrived home a bit earlier than usual. The house was peaceful. He parked his automobile in the driveway neatly. Logan was no longer a boy. He was 22 and had a quiet confidence. Even still, there was a tinge of doubt in his conversations. Putting my suitcase down and taking off my heels, I could hear the faint sound of water rushing overhead. I had a feeling Logan was taking a shower. It was not unusual. Still, the vibe was different. As I distracted myself with a quick sip of water, I tried to shake off the lingering feeling. Since Logan's father, my partner David, was on a business trip and wouldn't be back until the next morning, it was expected that the evening would be uneventful, with only Logan, me, and the peaceful quiet of our residence. I felt more empty than usual when I left the house. As I climbed the stairs, I saw that the bathroom door was slightly ajar and the sound of the water running became louder. Had to take a seemingly harmless look out of curiosity, but I was immobilized by what I could see Logan at the wash basin through the opening in the door, his back to me, naked, his shoulder hunched over, his hands moving purposefully as if focused on something, but I couldn't make out what it was. His trousers hung loosely over his hips, giving off a relaxed vibe that was out of character for him. Logan was always mindful of his privacy and kept to himself. It was almost exceptional to have a door open. I hesitated for a moment. Should I knock, yell, or close the door and let him be alone before I make a choice? Logan turned around in surprise as the door cracked. As I shifted my weight, his eyes grew wide with fear. "Oh, I didn't know you were home," he muttered frantically, trying to get a towel to cover up his earlier behavior. His voice faltered and his demeanor was very different from the calm young man's, and I had become used to it. "I didn't mean to bother you," I said quickly, turning my head away as my cheeks flushed with embarrassment. His face flushed a deep crimson as he looked down at the towel, clenched tightly in his fist. "No, it is inconsequential," but the quiver in his voice gave away his true emotions. Sensed something was wrong when he avoided eye contact and when his shoulders drooped as if he were carrying an invisible burden. I stopped, hand still on the edge of the door. Part of me wants to be considerate of his privacy, but the more aggressive and pushy part of me wants to ask, so I spoke softly to Logan as I walked into the bathroom, making sure the door was shut behind me. "If there's a problem, you can tell me. Promise you I will not pass judgment." He gripped the towel tighter, then let it drop a little for a moment. Thought he would say nothing, but he shook his head and sat on the bathtub side, he admitted. A little ashamed, his voice barely audible above a whisper. In order to reassure him, I leaned against the counter and said softly, "You don't have to tell anything if it makes you uncomfortable, but sometimes talking about it could be helpful." He nodded, purposefully, his eyes focused on the floor. "I've been struggling with a problem and wasn't sure who to ask for help." I was astonished at his vulnerability. Guard Logan had always been independent and self-sufficient, which is why he chose to confide in me. One person he rarely spoke to about personal matters was notable. "What is it?" I asked in an encouraging but neutral tone. He stopped and rubbed the back of his neck. "It has to do with my physique. I'm not sure if I should be concerned about anything that seems strange or if I'm just overanalyzing it." His words came out quickly as though he had been holding them in for a long time. A wave of sympathy for him washed over me. I said it probably took a lot of courage to say even that much, carefully choosing my words. "You're not by yourself. Everyone has these kinds of questions at some point, and it's admirable that you are aware of your health. Do you want help getting this issue resolved?" His expression was a mix of relief and apprehension as he glanced at me. I wouldn't protest. "Course not," I said with a reassuring smile. "Together we can deal with this." Initial uneasiness started to fade as our chat went on. Logan expressed his worries in a disjointed manner. His words were punctuated by worried glances. The floor listened calmly, offered consolation and helpful guidance. As Logan talked, the seriousness of his worries became more apparent. He had repressed these ideas for so long that his voice trembled with every word. Warm and smelling of soap. The bathroom seemed an odd place for such a private conversation, but it was the only place that mattered at that moment. "Suppose I just don't know if it's normal," Logan said, adjusting the towel's edge. "For this issue there is no guide. But I wouldn't really want to counsel my father." His remarks persisted, the unspoken truth piercing through the uneasiness. David and Logan had a good relationship. Still there was a persistent underlying disparity. Neither side seemed to understand how to overcome the obstacle. "To understand," I said softly as I leaned over the wash basin. "Even with people closest to you, it may be difficult to talk about certain things, but it's admirable that these problems are being addressed, because it's better than stifling them inside." He agreed, his face still hidden. "I just do not wish to appear peculiar or intrusive," I interrupted gently. "Everyone experiences such emotions at some point. Don't worry, you are not peculiar. You show bravery by confronting the issue." His lips formed a faint smile, and for a moment I thought the tension in his shoulders might release, but it was clear that he had more to think. He admitted in a barely audible voice that he feels out of place and disconnected from himself, and he was unsure about his own problems. His words struck me as incredibly poignant. This problem was not just a physical one, but a serious one that had been bothering him for a long time. After a moment of reflection, I assured Logan that there was nothing wrong with him, that he was just figuring things out, which is perfectly fine because nobody knew everything, especially at his age. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine for confirmation, and I honestly thought that was the case. So I assured him that I would help, and no matter what, we would work this out together. Logan's expression softened for the first time, and he leaned back against the wall, still holding the towel, and let out a long sigh. I had never talked about this topic before, and I didn't think anyone would understand. Sometimes, we don't recognize other people's abilities, I said with a slight smile. One might be surprised at their ability to understand if given the chance, but it is perfectly reasonable to be selective about whom you confide in, because not everyone requires access to all information. He nodded again more confidently this time and confirmed that made sense. The conversation then shifted from the weight of his initial concerns to more practical matters. Gave advice based on my knowledge and experience, speaking lightly and careful, not to come across as judgmental or uneasy. As we spoke, I noticed a change in Logan. The typical guardedness that surrounded him seemed to fade, replaced by a cautious openness. Now he seemed to be allowing himself to be seen not only by me but by himself. And during the conversation I saw his arousal rising as he looked at me, as was to be expected from a man of my sex. But I have to admit that it fascinated me because of its size. Help cleaned it and sometimes held it out of necessity, but in those moments I wanted to move it up and down. I didn't know what I was thinking, but I knew this wouldn't be the last time I held. And after what seemed like hours, the conversation tapered off and the tension in the bathroom that had been there before was replaced by calm. Logan looked at me with a look of relief and appreciation. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I never thought I would be able to talk to anyone about this." Grinned and put my hand out to gently pat his shoulder. "I'm glad you did. Don't forget that you can always come to me if you need to talk about anything. No matter what, I'm here for you." He nodded, his eyes glimmering with unshed tears. And as I stood up to leave the loo, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that Logan had told me. Relief that I had been able to help him. But also the inability to shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that his problems were more than he was exposing. The rest of the evening went smoothly after that. Logan retired to his room, leaving me alone in the living room. I was holding a cup of tea and thinking back on our conversation. It was unusual. Logan's choice to open up to me was significant, but it also left me feeling uneasy. What if he had more problems that I didn't know about? And what if I wasn't ready to help him? As the hours passed, I was filled with questions. Finally, I forced myself to go to bed, but sleep eluded me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the day's troubles pressing down on me. Despite the intrusion of doubt, I was certain that I would do everything in my power to help Logan, not realizing that what had happened that night was only the beginning. Over the next few days, there was a strange, almost tangible tension in the air, but everything seemed normal on the surface. Logan, going about his routine, working part-time at a nearby cafe, hanging out in his room, and avoiding the more somber topics we had covered, but I could not shake the feeling that something had changed. There was an unquantifiable but tangible bond between. I tried to act normal after Logan's revelation, and I tried to reassure him that everything would be all right, but there were hints that caught my attention. I saw him retreating into himself, his eyes avoiding mine as we walked down the hall, and the stiffness in his shoulders whenever I tried to strike up a conversation, as if he were withdrawing into a world he had not allowed me to enter. One night when we were sitting in silence at dinner, I caught him looking at me out of the corner of his eye, and our eyes locked for a second before he quickly looked away, his cheeks flushed. This fleeting interaction gave me a spooky feeling, as though there was an unspoken tension between us. I tried to ignore it, but it was difficult. The bond we shared seemed to be turning into something nebulous. Although David was normally cheerful, when he got home that evening and we followed our routine, Logan felt a dissue. He was more reserved than usual, and I saw his eyes often straying towards me in the evening, only to turn away when I saw it. It was subtle but obvious. The following day, David had gone to work, and I was home alone with Logan. As I was preparing lunch in the kitchen, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Logan standing in the doorway, his expression unsure, and I greeted him, trying to be. Is everything satisfactory? After giving me a long look, he nodded in agreement. Yes, I just wanted to talk. With a faint hint of anxiety brewing in my stomach. This was the moment that had been hanging between us for days. Put down the knife which I had been using and turned to face him head-on. What do you think, Logan? I asked, maintaining a calm tone of voice in spite of the nervous butterflies in my breast. He paused, pacing back and forth as if he was unsure whether or not to speak. I have been feeling strange lately. He began his speech slowly and deliberately, as if he were picking his words carefully. I cannot explain it exactly, but this undefined worry has been bothering me. It is recognized that you can connect with me. Correct, I said gently. If something is bothering you, I am available. I stared at him intently, watching as his eyes slid to the floor, avoiding mine. He did not answer right away. Rather, he let out a long sigh as though bracing himself for what was to. Eventually he added, I don't know how I feel right now. He spoke in doubtful tone. I saw the vulnerability in his eyes, and my heart ached for him. The doubt that had thrown a shadow over his face when we had first spoken remained. The Logan I had known was very different from the Logan in front of me. He had an unseen load that he seemed unsure how to handle. I walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder, saying softly, It's okay. Sometimes you don't have to have all the answers right away. Although we are unclear, we can work through this together. His eyes, which were filled with a mixture of thankfulness and an inexplicable feeling, met mine. His expression showed the real Logan for the first time, with a naked honesty. In a barely audible voice, he admitted that he was confused and unsure of who he was and where he fit in the world. I understand that I'm not a kid anymore. However, occasionally, I have doubts about the maturation process, as though I am caught up in the genuineness of his discovery, which caught me off guard. Logan was dealing with more serious emotional problems than merely changes in appearance or shame. That sentiment is shared by many others. It's quite difficult to understand everything at once, Logan, I said softly, holding his shoulder. However, you are not working alone on this project. I'm here to help you, and so is your father. He caught my gaze and his expression softened, though there was still a hint of doubt in his eyes. Just don't like to impose on anybody. Your presence is not a burden, I assured him in a firm tone. Despite my issues, we will always be a family. In difficult times we remain united. He nodded purposefully, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly as if my words had given him some solace for the rest of the afternoon. Logan seemed more relaxed. He stayed in the kitchen, helping me wash the dishes and chatting with me. His usual reserve was replaced by a cautious candor. For the first time in days, he looked like the Logan I knew, a little more laid back and less defensive. But even with his laughs and smiles, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding some underlying burdens. Even though this conversation was important, I could see that it was just the beginning because his eyelids were still closed. When I lay down in bed later that night, I thought about everything that had happened since that incident. More than he has in years. Logan confided in me. However, I had the impression that there were still unspoken facets of his character that he was unwilling to expose. One thing, however, was certain. I was determined not to let him down. No matter how long the project took or how difficult it was, this went beyond physical health or awkward questions. The main goal was to help Logan find his life's purpose and support him as he navigated the many obstacles that come with growing up. As the days went by, I realized that we were just getting started and that we would face any obstacles together. The days after our talk were marked by a precarious balance. Logan had opened up and I saw a sense of relief in him, as though he had let go of something. But even with his improved manner, there was still a reluctance, an unspoken tension that hung between us like a secret waiting to be revealed. As the week went on, I wondered how our conversations would turn out and if Logan really thought he could confide in me completely. Felt a deep feeling of obligation to help him through his inner turmoil, since he had trusted me with important parts of his life. However, there was still that elusive characteristic that I was unable to pinpoint, but it became evident every time I looked into his eyes. Sometimes it seemed like he was about to do something significant, something that would change everything. Logan was more distant than usual. One evening after supper, he hardly spoke to me during the meal, giving me curt and aloof answers to my questions. I saw him a lot, but he always looked away as though he was lost in his own thoughts. After dinner, I stood in the kitchen, busy washing the dishes, while David went into the living room to watch TV. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Logan returned in the doorway, his face unfathomable, his eyes, which had previously been full of doubt, now hidden by an unfathomable blackness. Dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face him, my heart pounding. Asked softly, trying to sound impartial, but it was hard to hide the nervousness. My voice, "Is everything okay?" He gave a nod but did not go into the room. There was a lengthy silence while we sat there, and I could feel the weight of his feelings hanging between us. Logan said quietly that he had been thinking about what they had been talking about. "When you said that he would be there for me." He seemed almost hesitant. He paused, then took a step towards it. His face said, "I think I must speak to you about another issue, one that I have not been able to understand." My heart raced at his words as I approached, my heart heavy with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Course we'll deal with, Logan. Whatever it is." He let out a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair, a tense gesture I had come to associate with vulnerable moments, indicating that one does not have to carry the weight alone. "This is difficult for me to explain," he continued, his voice trembling a little. "But I have a message for you." I had been struggling for a while, not knowing who turn to. I stood there, my breath tight in my throat, knowing full well that whatever it was very important. I did not put any pressure on him, but I wanted to offer my assistance. I simply nodded in encouragement. As a result, he paused, looking at the floor for a bit before focusing on me. "I don't know how to describe it, but I've been feeling a significant change in the words that hung in the air, so heavy and unexpected that they took me by surprise." Blinked, wondering if I had understood him correctly. "Different," I replied, my heart pounding, my voice barely audible above a whisper. "What are you saying?" Logan clenched his teeth and swallowed loudly, fighting to keep his composure. He conveyed his perplexity by saying that he has been questioning a number of facets of who he is. Think I might have fallen in love with you. I was hesitant to express my feelings since I wasn't sure whether they were unique to me. But after some consideration they seemed more and more real. His confession left me speechless. I stared at him, not sure how to react as I tried to understand what he was saying. His words were blurry. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was hearing, and my heart was pounding. What I had not expected was this. I had promised to stand by him, but it was not what I had anticipated. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the urgency and unvarnished truth. Logan was making no demands. He was just trying to understand how he felt at that moment. Understood that he needed someone to listen to him without bias. But I can't deny the relaxation I experienced when I remembered the size of his body in the restroom, a thought that often thrilled me. I whispered softly as I took a slow, steady breath, trying to calm the chaos inside of me. Logan, my voice trembling. Bit. I appreciate you being here, but I have a message for you. You stop trying to think of the right words. You're not a bad person. You are simply dealing with a confusing circumstance. And it's normal to feel confused occasionally, but it is crucial that you understand that the topic we are talking about is complex. This situation is complex. His eyes showed a mixture of relief and apprehension as he nodded. Wasn't sure who I should tell, and I didn't want to put up with this any longer.